Hey, good news everybody, Johto is behind us, so it's only uphill from here. Or downhill? I've never understood this expression because it's harder to go uphill, but it sounds more positive. Huh. Anyway, good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and these are the worst Gen 3 Pokemon to use in the Hoenn region. Number 10, Slaking. Honestly, this was single-handedly the hardest Pokemon to rank. I wasn't sure if I should go high, low, dishonorable mention, or not even make the list at all. But ultimately, I decided that Slaking should lead this video off, because while it has stats that could rival the legendary Groudon or Kyogre, Slaking is one of the least reliable Pokemon of all time thanks to its ability Truant, which only allows it to move every other turn. He's like your college roommate, bursts of motivation but probably just loafing around most of the time. Or maybe he was you in college. One or the other. This pretty much only makes Slaking viable in certain VGC formats where you can use a teammate's ability like Cofagrigus' Mummy or Weezing's Neutralizing Gas to erase this horrid ability. But even then, I think most people would rather use that strategy with Regigigas than Slaking. But refocusing on the region of Hoenn itself, this does mean if you want a Slaking for a playthrough, first you'll have to endure an even harder challenge, using Slack Off until level 18. Assuming you still have your sanity after that, you are blessed with Vigoroth, who is a remarkably good main story Pokemon for a while until you turn back into Slaking. Heck, Vigoroth at times has even been ranked above Slaking in competitive battling. It's one thing if you're like Dusknoir getting outclassed by Dusclops because of Eviolite, but Vigoroth is just straight up better. It's kind of embarrassing. Number 9, Castform. Despite being a gimmick Pokemon, Castform is actually a substantial improvement from the gimmick Pokemon we saw in Gen 2. Now, yes, its stats are still laughably poor with base 70 across the board, essentially making this guy die at Glalie, but Castform's strength lies in its incredible move pool. Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Hydro Pump, Energy Ball, Solar Beam. As long as you're willing to shill out the money for TMs, Castform has a use. I actually used one for my last Emerald Nuzlocke, and he was the last man standing when I went into the Hall of Fame. Plus, his gimmick where he can change his type on the fly by changing the weather is situationally useful. He's like a really bad terrestrialized Pokemon. But stats aside, this Pokemon is actually not too bad. It's unfortunately just a jack of all trades, master of none. There are Pokemon who cover each of its individual niches far better, but hey, his Pillsbury Doughboy looking butt is pretty cute. Number 8, Grumpig. I'll be honest, being a Psychic type in Hoenn is rough. And no, it's not just because all of them are outclassed by Gardevoir. It's more the fact that after Brawly's gym, Psychic types literally don't beat anybody aside from a few of the Magma or Aqua Grunts who are stuck using Golbat. And guess what? You find Spoink after Brawly's gym, so it doesn't even get to reap the benefits of the one gym Psychic beats in Hoenn. Yes, even though Grumpig on paper looks a lot better than Castform or some of the dishonorable mentions you'll see later in this video, in practice, Grumpig is one of Hoenn's most underwhelming Pokemon. It's the same speed as Gardevoir, hits less hard than Gardevoir, is found much later in the game than Gardevoir, and honestly, it's even about just as bulky as Gardevoir. Pretty much the only coverage move it learns that Gardevoir doesn't is Bounce, but are we really choosing this pig over Gardevoir for a move it learns at level 60 with only base 45 attack? Yeah, try again. Grumpig ain't even cute like Spoink. I feel like most of the time Spoink just exists in its own vacuum separate from Grumpig. Because let's be honest, that's the only one most people even remember. Number 7, Plusle and Minun. Yeah, I might be cheating by doing a 2-for-1 here, but honestly these Pokemon are similar enough to where I can confidently group them together. Let's just rip the band-aid off here. These are the worst Pika clones, and it's not even close. Pachirisu's a world champion, and all the others at least have some secondary typing that makes them somewhat decent. Plusle and Minun are built around a double battle gimmick that barely functions. Those being that their abilities of plus and minus that power up when they're on the field at the same time. This means Plusle and Minun only ever reach average strength during a select few double battles throughout the game. And it means you have to waste 2 of your 6 team slots with gimmick Pokemon. Yes, Hoenn does feature more double battles than any other region, especially in Emerald, but single battles are still the norm 90% of the time. Just pick up a Manectric and call it a day. Sure, it's not as cute or cuddly as Plusle and Minun, but it at least can do some significant damage on its own. Number 6, Tropius. Winning the award for the most underwhelming Pokemon ever, Tropius is an insanely cool Pokemon held back by the worst typing and stat synergy you've ever seen. It's a slow, quote-unquote, defensive grass-flying type. That's about as contradictory as vegan meatballs or gluten-free bread. It's just not meant to work like that. And on top of that, its 3D model just looks dumb and ORAS, so they even sapped away all the cool factor its sprite used to have. Tropius doesn't even really beat any of the late game gyms despite what the matchup chart says. Liza and Tate are strapped with rock and fire type moves to take it out, and Wallace carries Ice Beam on his Ace Milotic. Sure, he takes down Wallace's Whiscash pretty easily, but you know who else does that?
Any other good grass type in Hoenn that isn't Tropius!
He's not even really useful for Hoenn's big oceans as 99% of the trainers just use Tentacruel and Pelipper. And for the League, forget about it. He's a sacrifice mon if anything, and not even a good one at that. I know it sounds like I'm hating, but I genuinely love Tropius. I have been lobbying for an evolution or mega evolution for at least a decade now, and every generation I just become more and more disappointed in this thing. Hey, real quick, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next video on the Sinnoh region. I would really appreciate it. Number 5. Illumise. Yes, this time I am able to separate the twins. While Plusle and Minun are pretty much equally bad, Volbeat I can at least say is somewhat better than Illumise. That's not saying a lot though, Volbeat could have still very easily made this top 10 list on his own. But ultimately, just having access to Tailglow at level 21 in the Hoenn-based games is enough to make him somewhat strong enough for a main playthrough. I wouldn't recommend it though, because as I pointed out in my worst type series from 2020, Bug is most definitely the worst type to use in the region of Hoenn. Anyway, refocusing on Illumise, even just ignoring the fact that bugs are awful in this region, Illumise offers no redeeming qualities. Yes, it is a surprisingly decent TM learn set, but with its pitiful base 73 special attack, those TMs are much better served being used on other Pokemon. Especially in Gen 3 where they only break after one usage. I did think to myself, well, it could at least boost itself with Prankster Quiver Dance, that sounds pretty good, and then I realized, wait, where's Quiver Dance? You're telling me that Volbeat got Tail Glow, one of the best stat boosting moves in the game, and they couldn't even spare Quiver Dance on Illumise? I mean, that's just downright diabolical. Evil, even. Also, is it just me, or do these guys look like beta Pokemon who accidentally made it into the final game? I don't know. There's just something about them that looks very un-Pokemon-like to me. It has nothing to do with their placement on this list, but dang, I do just think they kind of stick out in a bad way. Number 4, Chimecho. Yes, they somehow took Grumpig, who was already a downgrade of Gardevoir, and downgraded it even further to Chimecho. Chimecho feels more like a Gen 2 Pokemon in the vein that it's one of those Pokemon that just exist to be rare and nothing else. It would have had an interesting niche if it was the only Pokemon that could learn Heal Bell or Wish, but since Game Freak immediately said no to that idea, Chimecho is truly a nicheless Pokemon. Chimecho probably has one of the worst level up movesets in all of Gen 3, and in ORAS, it's not much better. Oh boy, he gets Synchronoise now! Surely that's going to help! But yeah, other than that, everything I said about Grumpig also applies here. It's somehow even worse than Grumpig stat-wise, gets even less useful moves, appears even later into the game, and on top of that, it's just obnoxious to find. Only appearing 2% of the time on Mount Pyre Summit in Gen 3. So you're pretty much just wasting a ton of time for a Dex entry, and nothing more. Number 3, Delcatty. Okay, let's get Delcatty's positives out of the way. Skitty doesn't really learn any good moves in Gen 3, so you can just evolve it right away with a Moonstone and have a Pokemon with somewhat decent stats for that point in the game. I mean, it'll stop being useful around the time you reach Watson, but at least you get 2 good routes out of it. But even this can't be said about an ORAS, because if you use a Moonstone early, you do miss out on Play Rough, one of its best attacks. Also, I'm not even sure if Delcatty's Gen 3 redeeming factor is even that redeeming, since the only way to make Skitty's encounter rate higher than 1% is to get to the post-game so it can become a daily swarm encounter. They also have one of the worst signature abilities in Normalize, an ability that grants extra power to all of Delcatty's non-normal type attacks, but strips away any coverage this Pokemon gets. You know, one of the few things normal types actually do really well now? No, in actuality, Skitty and Delcatty's only real redeeming factor is that they are pretty good at winning the cuteness contest since they come with all the moves you need. So, I guess May capturing one in the anime to use in contests was actually pretty accurate. Wait, is this just another poorly aged gimmick Pokemon in disguise? I give up. Number 2, Spinda. As a normal type with base 60 stats across the board, Spinda is somehow an even more underwhelming version of Castform. Even its gimmick offers nothing in terms of usability. Castform can at least change its own type to fight foes it couldn't before, but Spinda's gimmick is purely cosmetic. Even as a gimmick, it feels random. Plusle, Minun, Castform, and Shedinja are all gimmick Pokemon that at least showcase some new Gen 3 features like double battles, changing forms, and abilities. But Spinda really showcases nothing new to the series. Random generation has always been a thing. I mean, sure, if you catch a shiny, it's likely the only one to ever exist, so that's cool, I suppose. But focusing purely on Spinda's usability, it offers absolutely nothing in terms of a main story playthrough. In fact, the only time Spinda has ever been remotely usable was in Generation 5, where the Dream World gifted it with the ability of Contrary and Superpower, which essentially gives it a bulk up boost every time it uses the move. Unfortunately, Game Freak, for whatever reason, immediately took away its ability to learn Superpower in Black 2 and White 2. And now, as of Gen 8, you can't even get Superpower Spinda anymore by transferring. Now Contrary just feels like a useless ability on a useless Pokemon. I mean, I guess you could use Power Up Punch and watch its attack go down. That's sort of funny, I guess. But yeah, I don't think it even learns a single move that benefits from Contrary now, which is really sad. And just like usual, it's time for the dishonorable mentions. First up is Nosepass, who kinda parallels Apom from the Johto video. It's a pretty horrendously outclassed rock type who's only notable for its rarity, but due to the fact that you can get Probopass in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and just how good steel types are in general, I could not confidently place Nosepass on this list. And according to the internet, you can actually evolve Nosepass as soon as you get Surf. You don't even need all 8 badges to unlock the lower floors of New Mauville, so that's pretty neat. If this was just Gen 3 Hoenn though, it certainly would have made it. Next up we have Pelipper, who I'm including purely because of how outclassed it is just in the context of the Hoenn-based games. Pelipper did not receive its new ability Drizzle until Gen 7, which is pretty much the only reason Pelipper is a good Pokemon today. Obviously, this is also why Pelipper did not make the top 10, I just had to clarify why. Next up, we have Sableye, who sort of loosely used to be a gimmick Pokemon due to being the first Pokemon with no weaknesses, at least before fairies were introduced. But now that fairies do exist, Sableye is just a really bad regular Pokemon with awful stats. However, it does have a Mega Evolution, and was mildly useful in Gen 5 competitive when it gained the Prankster ability. So for those reasons, Sableye narrowly avoids cracking the top 10. And lastly, our final dynamic duo of Hoenn, Solrock and Lunatone. They're pretty underwhelming Pokemon, but if you're just using them for a main story playthrough, they're not the worst. Their stats aren't amazing, but definitely usable, and they actually both get a decent number of powerful attacks by leveling up. At number 1, Luvdisc. Luvdisc absolutely takes the cake for the fully evolved Pokemon with the worst stats ever conceived. Still kinda salty that Alomomola wasn't an evolution, but whatever. What's most impressive about Luvdisc is that by definition, it's really not even a gimmick Pokemon. It doesn't have something intentionally holding it back, like Shedinja's 1 HP, or Delibird only learning Present, or Unknown only learning Hidden Power. No, Luvdisc is actually a Pokemon that was designed to be as normal as any other. Except, it just sucks. I mean, sure, you could argue it only exists for heart scales to exist, something that has even gone out of style as of Gen 8, since you can just relearn moves on the fly now. Speed is its only above average stat, which it can further contribute to with its ability Swift Swim, but who really cares about speed when you hit with the force of a mosquito smashing into a car windshield? The cruelest part of all though, is that Luvdisc is a super late game Pokemon. I mean, not that it really even matters, even if Luvdisc was a Route 1 Pokemon, it would still be terrible. But the fact that you get this thing just before the Pokemon League just feels like insult to injury. Yes, Luvdisc is the generational kind of terrible that we only see once every... well, I was going to say every generation, but probably not even that. But that'll do it for the Hoenn region's worst Pokemon. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos in the series, and I'll see you guys next time.